Hello and welcome to Bealtaine at Home 2021, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Tara Byrne and I'm the Artistic Director of Bealtaine, Ireland's national festival which celebrates the arts and creativity as we age. The festival is produced by Age and Opportunity, the national development organisation promoting quality of life for everyone aged 50 and upwards. And so to Intersectional Identities, the third of the Bealtaine Debate Series, which every year aims to generate discussion and reflection on topics relating to age and ageing. In devising this discussion, we want to explore how it feels to be older and a member of the LGBTQIA+ community in Ireland. And to that end, we've also commissioned a short documentary from filmmaker Cathy Dunn, which will be released later this year. The discussion is chaired by Rory O'Neill, featuring Daithí Clayton, Dr. Alva Smith, and Will Kennedy. Rory O'Neill, aka Panty Bliss, is a writer, performer, pub landlady, gender discombobulist, and accidental activist, and has been a fixture of Ireland's gay community since the late 80s. She played a central role in the campaign for marriage equality in Ireland, and in 2014, a speech she made in the Abbey Theatre about oppression and what it's like to be LGBTIQ+ in Ireland became an international sensation. It was lauded as one of the world's great speeches, put to music by Pet Shop Boys, and turned her into an iconic figure for equality in Ireland. I'd like to finish by thanking Rory and all the panellists in advance, as well as our core funders, the Arts Council and the HSC, and the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth for supporting our film. Please check out our other events on the Bealtaine website and YouTube channels, all available at bealtaine.ie. You can also look at ageandopportunity.ie for information on our other initiatives. Over to you, Rory.
Thanks, Tara. First, I should say that when Tara asked me to chair this meeting, I was horribly offended until I remembered I was 52. So, first of all, let's introduce our guests. I'll start with you, Alva. Not that you need any introduction, Alva, but for the benefit of anybody who's been under a heterosexual rock for the last while, tell us who you are and your sort of situation in relative to this discussion today.
Well, I'm basically an activist and a campaigner. I was an academic in UCD for something like 40 years and led many campaigns from there, rightly or wrongly. I was very closely involved in the middle, like yourself, of the marriage equality campaign, and I was one of the leaders of the Repeal the Eighth Amendment campaign. And I am very pleased to say that I am a May girl, I'm a Bealtaine girl. My birthday is at the end of the month, and I know you do want us to say our age, and I think it's really interesting. It's still kind of hard to say your age when you're older, which shows you the kind of stigma there is against being older. But I am actually very pleased and very proud. I'm going to be 75 at the end of the month, and I'm really quite chuffed that I'm still here and campaigning.
And still looking fierce, Alva.
Oh,
right. Will, you're down in Cork. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, I'll get the age out of the way first. A bit like yourself, I was a bit, what am I doing? I'm older, but I am 63, so yeah. I've been an activist really since the mid-80s, but really got involved in 1994. I was born in 1957, and Ireland back then was really bad, and so I did a lot of things to deal with my own sexuality. I even spent 4 years studying to be a Catholic priest, then ended up in the army for 21 years. I left that when I got cancer and went back to UCC and did a degree, got myself a degree for my 60th birthday. And my activism is really, since 1994, I joined the Gay Men's Health Project. I was negative myself at the time. I'm living with HIV. And in 2007, I was diagnosed with HIV, but I had been working in the whole area of health right up to that. But since 2007, it really took off. I joined ACT UP Dublin because there was no ACT UP Cork then. And about 3 years ago, myself and a few others founded ACT UP Cork. And we have a support group here for people living with HIV for all ages and not just LGBT. But I think that's about me for now anyway. Okay.
That's a lot. And Dahi, yourself.
Yes. Hello and thank you. My name is Dahi Clayton. I was born David in the United States, but now I'm a good son of Ireland. So I use the name Dahi. I was born in Chicago, but my grandmother was born up in County Monaghan, near Emmyvale, with the Trainer family. So I decided a couple of years ago that I was going to flee that train wreck that was happening in the United States, especially for older queer folk. And so I've come home to Ireland, and I couldn't be happier. And I'm glad to be among all the Irish queer folk here. Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you. You're down in Youghal, aren't you, Dahi?
I am indeed.
Well, Dahi, let me start with you, really. Like, what has your general experience of growing older as a queer person been? And in particular, have you encountered any issues or maybe surprisingly, good benefits to being a member of the queer community as you're getting older?
Well, yes, and yes. So I'm dealing with a pair of, significant health issues. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer about 9 years ago, and that's been quite a journey, but I'm still on my feet with the help of lots of incontinence products. And a few years ago, I was diagnosed with early onset dementia, which just makes it even that much more entertaining. And what I found being here in Ireland, that when you have dementia, at least here in Youghal, nobody knows, it merges so well with the Irish eccentricity, the propensity for alcohol intake, so I feel very, very much at home and welcomed by everyone.
And do you think, as a member of the queer community, very often I think so much of our community resources is built around, the gay scene, for example, which can be very youth focused. So, being diagnosed with onset dementia and having cancer and your beautiful silver locks, do you feel that has sort of in any way put you to the outside of a community you had when you were younger?
Well, no, because I decided, I came out very, very early, just 6 years after the Stonewall Rebellion in 1974, 5 years, I guess, 1969. So I've been out and queer all of my life, and I just threw that off, and throwing off oppression, whether that came from the state where it was illegal to be queer in the US when I came out, just as it was here in Ireland, it was a sin in the Catholic Church. And I don't know if it still is, I don't keep up. And the medical community considered it a sickness, Well, I've thrown off all of that pathology, all of it, so that if anyone has a problem with my queerness, it's not my problem anymore. It's theirs.
Alva, do you, like, as the sole lesbian in this quartet, do you think there are differences, for growing older as a lesbian in our community or as a gay man?
Well, I'm sure, yes, no, or indeed, maybe somebody intersex or trans or whatever. I think there are definitely differences if you look at a lot of practical issues, particularly in relation maybe to healthcare. But I think, or housing, there are a lot of different intersections, and they're not just about our gender expression or our sexuality, but also about things like social class, ethnicity, whether or not we have a disability, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I think that's always kind of a complex sort of question. But I was thinking when you were talking to Daithí, and hats off to you, Daithí, I was actually thinking that in some ways, as you grow older, I mean, I do now have to assume the fact that I am definitely older at nearly 75, that I think I kind of agree with you, Daithí. There's a level at which you think if people don't really like or get or want to be around who I am, that really is their problem. It is absolutely not my problem anymore. I don't give a fig. But it's taken quite a while to get to that point, and I don't assume that everybody's at that point either.
Yeah.
And I also think that I'm very fortunate. I also think that there is a fantastic community that I benefit from, an LGBTI. But then, people know me. So in a way, they kind of maybe have to be nice to me. I don't know. But they are incredible. But they are, I'm sure you all feel this, that they really a very kind bunch of people, big bunches of people, because we've all been through very hard times and big struggles. So it's hard. I think maybe for lesbians, that one of the big differences between maybe it's LGBTIQAs who haven't got children. I mean, I think that issues of family maybe are very different for us. I mean, my history in relation to family is very much that of a lesbian. My daughter went to live with her father, and when she was quite little. And that doesn't matter now. I mean, I'm a granny and our kids and all that kind of thing. But we do have different histories. We have different trajectories, and they leave their marks and their scars. But if we can stay more or less healthy, that's the main thing. So the big thing is for all of us to be able to access the healthcare we need. And that's not a done deal. We can come back to that, I'm sure. But I feel very strongly about that. I don't want to be in an old people's home where there are, I don't want to be in an old people's home at all after the pandemic. I don't think anybody does. But I certainly don't want to go somewhere for older people if there are not some people like me there who have at least similar related kinds of sexual histories and so on. I just find that anathema to me, or that I would have to hide the fact that I'm a dyke. I hate having to hide that. In fact, I don't ever hide it. What am I talking about? Yeah. I wouldn't dream of hiding it. They just go
Will your own journey, like the army and earlier on, even thus the priesthood, was very sort of heterosexually dominated cultures. And then you sort of find yourself and you're this, gay man. Does that Ailbhe sort of, hinted at there, worry you? The idea that you might end up in a care situation where it may be uncomfortable to be your out and true self again?
It would absolutely horrify me now. I just wouldn't put up with it, to be honest, because it took me years. I am 26 years clean and sober now. I got sober when I was 37, and that's when I started really dealing with my sexuality. The priesthood, that was an escape. I really believed I'd get cured of my sexuality, and no, in there, it was like frying pan fire. I have to say that, honestly. I was in a seminary, and I thought, I'm in a gay bar every day. I thought, hanging around here. So when I left, I went to the army, but in the army, it was illegal until 93 in Ireland. So I was in the army 88, say, and everybody knew I was gay. I'm kind of an obvious gay. You can't get away with it, which is okay. But once I got sober, I came out in the army, and I will always remember find that once before come to accept your own sexuality. I found in the army that the lads were okay once I was no longer hiding. If that sounds like kind of strange, as long as I was hiding, they were suspicious. But as long as I was out, so I'll always remember from 94 to when I left in 2012, I was known as the gay chef because I was a chef in the army. If we were going overseas, there'd be a call to Collins's Barrack Park from Dublin, Limerick, or somewhere they're putting together a platoon. I want to talk to the guy, but I can't remember his name. He's the gay chef. And I'd be shout in the office, well, they're looking at the bag. It was it became... I don't ever, as April was saying, like go into a home. No, that would really bother me, because like I have a lot of other issues. Like now, when you were saying about like getting older as an LBGT, I think a lot is up to ourselves. I'm wearing today the Gay Project Frontrunners t-shirt. I'm in a lot of different groups here in Cork. Like I'm in a hill walking group, a book club, the runners. If I want to keep involved, it is up to me. I do understand about people who are still, older and never say came out or anything. But I feel that those of us who can maybe should lead the way, even for older people, to show that, like, yes, we can be part of that community. Because I find, as a gay man, when you're saying differences with lesbians, I find like that over 35, you're not visible anymore almost. It's youth centre. Like if I went into the only gay bar here, Chambers, I would feel so out of place. Like, almost like a perv in a kindergarten or something, like amongst all these young kids. And I find that a bit sad. Whereas when you go in the other groups, in the hill walking group in particular, we have a wide range from 18 to 70. And you're all mixing with each other. And it's like, I'm hearing their views, I'm hearing my views, because my views are a lot different to the young people today. I took part in the marriage campaign and everything, but I'm not a believer in marriage, just marriage. Not gay, not straight, anything. And many an argument I had about being homophobic. I was accused of being homophobic when people didn't understand I was arguing against marriage, not gay marriage. I voted for it, was a witness at friends getting married for them and everything. So I was voting for equality. I want my queerness to be recognised today. Like, I'm terrified, I suppose, when you talk about homes and things, I'm terrified of assimilation. I spent years being told I was different and, you don't fit in, and now I want to. Now I don't want to into that heteronormative frame. Like the nursing, the old folks' home. God, can you just picture it? Going in there, like, and nobody. There could be people around like me, like, but never able to mention it, never talk about it. It ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen, because I'll be kicking and screaming in there.
Well, one of you brushed on something there that I've always found interesting, which is you said that you weren't a believer in marriage. One of the things that I found great comfort, I guess, but also exciting about the queer community that I joined in the 80s was that the community was almost by definition quite radical on a lot of issues. Because I think in order to reach the point at that time where you were going to go and seek out other queers and find some gay club in a basement somewhere and cross that threshold, you almost really had to reach a point where you were prepared to say, fuck all of that, outside there. Because so much of regular society was not, available to you. You couldn't get a good job in the bank and be an open queer. You couldn't get married. You couldn't, find a nice doctor and a chocolate Labrador and a picket fence, in Dunleary. All of that was not available to you. So it sort of forced you to look at other options and other ways of being happy. So almost as a self-selecting group, the community that I found, under this disco ball on Eli Place or whatever, were quite radical. They were prepared to throw all of that out and look at other ways of being. And the community has, as it's become more accepted and things have changed, that the community is, as a whole, less radical, is my feeling. And that was not something I had anticipated. Ailbhe, you're nodding. Is that because you agree with me, or because you're thinking that guy's nuts?
I think I think on the whole, I agree with you. I think there are reasons for it. But, I fought really hard, as did you, and as did Will, and as did so many people I know, even though I always said I'm not the marrying kind myself. It's not, but I fought for other people's right, because I believe people should be free to do these things. And if straight people absolutely. Can do them, we should be free to say yes or no. And of course, I have always been inundated with proposals. And I mean, I'm very well aware I'm speaking to a married man there, so I'm being very careful actually at the moment.
Well, which came as a surprise to me, Ailbhe, because I used to say during the campaign a lot that I wasn't the
Just
marrying type. And
pointing
then
out to the benefit of the audience that your diatribe was undermined by the little fact of a lovely, happy marriage. And I wish you very well. And I always wish everybody well in that situation. But as to whether or not we're more or less radical, and I'll be very brief because I know Daithí wants to come in on this as well. But just to say really quickly that I think that the pioneers, the initiators, those of us who were there way back when, all of us around this virtual table, of course we were radical. We were pushing the boundaries. We were pushing the doors down. Our politics were radical. I came into feminism and the women's movement. I wanted to recreate the world, and I still do. But that doesn't mean that everybody who is lesbian or gay or trans or intersex or queer or binary or non-binary or whatever, of course they're not. They're going to be like everybody. We are a mixed bunch. And of course, there are more and more and more of us, all of us. So I think that we who are radicals have to stay radical, but also accept that not everybody is going to be radical in that way, but there is still a place for us. Of course there is. There is still so much that we have to do. So sorry,
Daithí,
Daithí.
would you like to come in there?
Yes, and thank you, because all three of us, or four of us, have mentioned about care homes, and whether you're, I'm knocking at the door of one, I mean, I'm there, and I want to make damn certain that it is absolutely queer. I do not want, as they have in the first one in Europe was in Stockholm. It's a Rainbow House, opened, I don't know, more than 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. They're all over Germany. Catholic Italy has one in Rome, okay? But not here in Ireland. I don't even hear the conversation. I'm listening, in the Dublin bubble, in Cork, in Galway, in Limerick, all over. Where's the strategy? I don't hear it. And I do not want to end up in a care home sitting around with a bunch of straight people talking about their children and grandchildren. And if that's heterophobic, I own it.
Well, it is interesting that care homes has come up because I guess, queer people have for so long formed their own families. And fewer of us have our own children and so on. And so I think as you get older, the idea that you would rely on your chosen family for care as you get older, and especially when most of your chosen family is probably similarly aged to you, that becomes a bigger and bigger issue, I think, because while, children might feel, society, will sort of encourage them to look after their parents, but it feels weird to expect your own chosen family, your queer chosen family, to be the ones looking after you as you get older. Is that something that you think is particularly... Yeah, go on, Ailbhe.
Well, I was going to say that, what you're saying, what Daithí was saying, what we were saying, all indicates that what we do need a strategy for older LGBTIQ people in this country. Australia, for example, has a really, really interesting strategy. How much they're delivering on it, I don't know, but they do commit to training healthcare personnel to be equipped to understand the needs of older, which are very diverse. LGBTIQs, as we said, we're a very diverse bunch. And it is happening in the Scandinavian countries. It's happening in the Netherlands. It's happening in many countries. And I see there have been many attempts over the years to actually do this. Kieran McKinney, for example, is very active in that regard, and in Glen and so on. But I haven't heard very much talk about it recently. And it is something I feel quite strongly about.
James Hagan is doing it at the Champions program, and it's brilliant. I have some issues with LGBT Ireland, but the Champions program is not one of them. James Hagan is doing exactly that, Ailbhe, training healthcare workers, and not just in Dublin, but all over the island, and it's brilliant.
But we need government to understand this. So I know that this is sponsored by Minister O'Gorman, by Roderick O'Gorman, and I would be calling on him. I hope he's watching. I hope you're watching, Minister, that we do need a strategy for older LGBTIs, because it has been focused on youth. That's fine. I'm all for young people, but I'm old and I want somebody to be up for me and other people like me. Sorry.
Can I just come in there?
Yes, Will. Yeah,
we were talking about like the care homes and stuff, but I as an older and an LGBT queer man all my life, like I'd also like to see a bit more training, whatever you might like here, call it, in the health profession generally. Because when I was diagnosed with HIV, okay, it was 2007, and I don't think things have improved that much though. I don't think I was treated really well. The clinic were all for encouraging me to stay quiet. Don't talk about it. You don't need to. Oh, we've got a list of HIV-friendly doctors. And when I went to the new doctor, because I switched from the old family doctor, I mean, he was old. I think I would have shocked him to death if I told him like I had HIV. My new doctor was one of the best I've met, and I'd love if there was other GPs like him. He admitted to me I was the first person that he met that he was treating with HIV. First gay man that he was talking to, as he put it. And he said, well, I know nothing about it. He said, we'll go on a journey together. And we've done that for the last 11 years. Now, I was fortunate in having that GP. But when I look around GP surgeries, when I go into them, like, and everything, because I've been a lot. I've had cancer. I'm a cancer survivor. 2010. I'm in remission now. 5 years. But I walk into a surgery and I see things on cancer, things on kidney things that you don't see any LGBT literature whatsoever of any kind, like, you know. And my GP admitted to me that actually young doctors don't know how to talk to somebody about their sexuality or something if it's a problem. If you need to talk about STIs or anything, how do I bring it up? How do I talk about it? Like it's like somehow we're still seen as in that area somehow. Like a friend of mine who was diagnosed with HIV, 2 years going to see his GP, and the only reason the GP suggested an STI screening was when he opened his file and saw that his partner was male. He assumed straight away, oh, he's male. Oh, he has a partner male. Maybe now we should, after 2 years of being sick. It's just, I think in general, the healthcare needs to be really learn more about us. And I think it's also important, as we were saying a while ago, though, just on that point about diversity. When I say I'm a radical still and everything, I'm completely, utterly open to diversity. It's the one thing I believe. None of us are the same. Absolutely none of us. Dahi will remember a conversation with somebody recently, and it was a younger lesbian was in the group, and she was saying something like, all on about diversity, and then suddenly said, but we are the same. I want, like, you know, we all want to have the house and the children in the suburbs. And I'm sitting there with my hand up in the Zoom. No, we're not all the same. It's like, and then we got chatting. And that's why I love chatting with younger people and everything. You're able to explain yourself rather than being seen as somebody who is, I don't know, wanting to cause trouble for the community or something, like, you know.
Well, one of the reasons I think this discussion is so important is, well, you know, from my own perspective, you know, when I was 26, I was diagnosed with HIV. And for about 10 years, I never imagined that I would reach 50. And so I never even thought about this stage of my life for so long. But because, you know, gay rights movement, you know, is still, you know, so relatively young, you know, since sort of the 60s, you know, this is the first generation of older queer people. So it isn't a discussion we've almost had to have before, and it's certainly a discussion we haven't had before, because this is the first generation of older queer people who are discovering that there are issues or concerns about it. But, you know, getting the conversation started is, you know, is important, and I hope that if nothing else comes from today's conversation, I hope we do that. Yes, Ailbhe.
Well, I just wanted to say that I do think the pandemic has really highlighted the gaps, the deficits for what really needs to happen. Just when I think of older LGBTIQs, because, you know, we were condescended to during, and I'm talking about people who really are older. 52 is not older. 63 is not, to my mind, older. I'm afraid, you know.
Thank you.
Because everybody is aging, but older comes in kind of tranches. So your 70s, your 80s, your 90s, and there are different needs at each of those stages. But we were condescended to. We were told to cocoon. We were treated like absolute idiots, as if we were sort of little put in cotton wool. I was so raging because it deprived of us of our agency. And that's the worst thing you can do when you're to older people, is to say, there, sit down now. We'll explain everything to you. Thank you. I don't want anything explained. I want to learn and do it myself. I was like that as a baby, and I'm still like that at 75. And why not? But the point is that there was also an assumption that as older, if anybody thought about us at all, it was, oh, well, of course, family will take care of older people. Family, and it goes to what Dahi was saying, that the assumption there is that we all have family. Some of us do, and many of us don't, because of that generational difficulty where so many of the LGBTIs of my generation had to break with our families, or were rejected by our families, or find it difficult. I experienced a period of, it wasn't exactly estrangement, but definitely nobody acknowledged, except one or two members of my family. Nobody acknowledged that. My family, my daughter lives in Britain. There wasn't an automatic family, even for me, as somebody who is very lucky and privileged in my life, as white and relatively healthy and middle class and have a pension. And I had everything going for me, and it was still really difficult. And I really, really, really thought that was something which needed a lot more attention during the pandemic. And the point is, the consequences of that are there. And we should be taking much more care of one another and of our community as a whole. And we need our government to get behind us and to invest in that and to resource it. That isolation has been over. I live on my own. It was quite isolating.
Yeah.
I
managed,
but
sorry, Dahi, do you want to come in there?
Well, Rory, both you and Alva have referenced how historically the queer community has had to take care of itself when no one else would. During the AIDS epidemic, not just gay men looking after each other, but lesbians here in Ireland and in the US and the world over, they were called blood sisters, who could donate blood when gay men could not. And they showed up and care. And a new definition of rainbow family, because that's what families do. Whether it's family of origin or choice, taking care of each other. And yes, I am so inspired. I came into this bitter and jaded, but I'm actually inspired by all of you that there is hope. And not just among the older queer generation, but I've had brilliant intergenerational conversations with this new younger generation of queer folk and their allies. So I am hopeful, and yeah.
Yes, Will.
Can I just it's fascinating listening. Like, it's something, if I was saying, it's like and Dahi just saying the LGBT people family having to take care of themselves. I am a volunteer with the LGBT helpline that's on every week, and we just started an initiative, befriending. It's where we're going to as well as taking calls, which I do twice a month. Now we're going to befriend, say, the older person, and you will have a conversation once a week with that person. But it was very interesting in the survey that was being done before this initiative was being launched, that, for those of us, say, who are activists or out or anything, it's relatively okay, for us, but it was absolutely shocking, some of the stuff that came out. The isolation of, say, people my age, older, that have never come out, living in little villages, never spoken to anybody. Other people terrified that they were out and going into homes, as we've spoken about. And it was absolutely scary to hear of people. In the survey, one fact frightened me. When asked for next of kin, I think it was 20% could not list next of kin because of this, family problems, being on their own and everything. And these are the type of things that, we're doing a befriending service and we're relying on volunteers, but as I was saying, we need the government. We really need some kind of initiative to be undertaken, because like it's great that people can do this, but my worry is always, I'm out there, I'm an activist, I'm open about my HIV status and everything, but those that are still silent and suffering, we really need, the government need to wake up and do something for us.
We don't need more research. We don't need more research. That Visible Lives study from LGBT Ireland is 9 years old, 9 or 10 years old. As my hero in the dementia community, Helen Rochford Brennan, likes to say, we don't need more research. We need deliverables.
Yes, we want to give the Australian strategy and let them to work on it. Because I think that Australian strategy is really very good. That research is actually, it was 2011 that research came out on visible lives. I think what Will is saying that, it's constantly being aware of needs, and we are still having to reach out and embrace people ourselves, and that really it gets actually a bit exhausting, to tell you the truth. You think, how loud do you have to shout and for how long? And I just want to go and throw things at Leinster House sometimes to wake them up.
Yes.
Well, I hope the minister isn't listening. I'm not going to throw things.
It's probably a little unfortunate that we don't have a member from the trans community here, because of course they have particular health needs as they grow older, separate and distinct from cis peoples. And of course, I think it's just horrendously difficult to be living in the world at the moment as a trans person. So I think they have a particular situation that needs to be discussed as well. So it's unfortunate we don't have one here today. But
so do intersex people.
Yeah, Alva, from your do you think there are particular economic concerns for older queer people?
Well, I certainly think that there can be. Again, we don't actually have any data here in this country on that, but certainly everywhere else, because our generation, and I'm thinking particularly late 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on, we were that generation of pioneers who were pushing the boat out and who suffered definitely in terms of work, jobs, careers, and so on. And that's, it's not absolutely across the board, but it is very, very, very common. And that, of course, has a direct impact on how you're situated economically as you grow older. So reach your mid-60s into your 70s, where maybe you very likely don't have a pension other than the state pension. You've nothing to fall back on. You've no savings. You may not have any. It's quite likely that you don't have close family connections, and you can really find yourself absolutely on your uppers and economically in a very bad situation. And the research which has been done elsewhere always shows that if you take, we'll just say for the moment, lesbians and gays, going back to sort of that generation, that when you look at it intersectionally and you look at class and you look at ethnicity and disability, of course, what you find is that those who were more disadvantaged there's a double whammy effect as they grow older, because they're not only a lesbian or a gay man, and I'm just talking about lesbian because I do take the point about trans people and intersex and so on. You find, of course, that there's a kind of a multiplier, amplifier effect there, so that you are much more likely to have worse health outcomes, to suffer from underlying conditions. You are much more likely to be economically in the lower percentiles. You can see that you're also much less likely to have somewhere stable to live, which is a major problem in this country at the moment. So, and not likely to be resolved soon. So there are very, very, very real problems across the board. And one of the difficulties, all very well, we're here and we're talking and we're well able to speak up for ourselves. But there is a whole unheard, unseen layer of people who are not necessarily being reached even by our great community. So that, I think, is why the work of LGBT Ireland is really important, and many other community-based groups.
Tilda, the longitudinal data, they do great work asking about older Irish folk. They need to include queer older Irish folk. Rattle that cage. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's rattleable, and I think they will be open to that, because remember, something you said yourself, Dahi, we are still the radicals out there saying we're now the radicals who are older. We know what older LGBTs want. And it's always been like that. I mean, people would always say to me, because I was for such a long time basically a teacher in UCD of teaching people. People would say, well, who is your role model, Alva? And I would say, well, I don't know. We had to make up our own. We had to be our own role models. I mean, you all know that. This is not an immodest.
I've been here in Ireland long enough to know, if you want to get anything done in this place, get an Irish lesbian, and I can name you names. Seriously. Hey, Hayley
Will, you wanted to come in there?
Is my champion.
Yes, absolutely.
And Hayley is watching. She left a comment just there. Will, you wanted to come in there?
Hayley is a very, very dear friend, going back about, oh God, she'll kill me, 30 years, we're friends. But what I wanted to come in on was, like, I'm so glad we mentioned, like, class and ethnicity and everything, because I'm working class. And I'm one of those who live on a pension. I'm fortunate that I have an army pension, and getting cancer, I got an invalidity pension. So combine those two pensions, otherwise I'd be dead through lack of money. But I mean, I didn't get a degree until my 60th birthday. One, to do with leaving a job, because I couldn't afford to go to college when I was a younger man, like, and everything. I was educated myself. I spent 4 years studying to be a priest, so I did philosophy and everything. So I felt I was well educated. But this whole idea of, like, there's a forgotten sector. I find sometimes, like, in academic, in theatre and whatever, being LGBT is fine, but among the working class ourselves, like, I live in a vast working class estate here in Cork, it's pretty big, and it's changing. But when I was here, when my parents lived here and I used to visit, I would be very careful about being out and everything. But recently I've been on the radio, I've been on the Evening Echo here and the Examiner about my HIV status, and it's so surprising the difference now from my neighbours, even my older neighbours. Like, I'm stopped sometimes going out in the street, they call me little boy. I'm 63, but these little old ladies stop me. Oh, little boy, it was wonderful hearing you on the radio. So I'm like, little boy, I look around, who are they talking to? But my point is, like, it's changing only by people being visible. And if we can encourage others, but, like, this whole thing of support and everything, I actually think our government needs a good kick up in the arse. I wanted to train to set up peer support for HIV in Ireland. And do you know where I did my training? My training in Belfast and in London, paid for by a charity in England. They paid for the flights, for the training, for the hotel, for everything, because there was no funding for training for peer support. I could really rant on about the lack of support, like, in those areas, the HIV, but this is about everything else. And I've tried to include, class, religion, ethnicity, like religion. The one big thing I would advise any older person who's non-religious like myself, make a will. Because when my father and mother died and I was taking care of it all, it's assumed you're Catholic. They come in, the funeral people home, the mass is arranged. I would get up out of the coffin and haunt them, or just at the funeral, like, if they tried to bury me with a mass or anything like. But I've had to actually make that clear in my will, that, like, otherwise there's that huge assumption, and it's the same if you go into a care home or somebody comes into your home, because we live in a very heteronormative world. I think anyway, it's really, and everything there's an assumption, unless you're a screaming cuff like I am, like, and they come in and they know straight away. But, like, if you're not and reserved and hiding it, there's an assumption that you're heterosexual and don't get me started on single people and how we're discriminated against. Health service, everything is set up for couples. I could really go mad here. Sorry?
Well, I just want to say that we have a comment here from Lorna Rose, says that Tilda are now collecting gender and sexual identity information. So lots of these economic health questions can be examined.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
Um,
That's very good about.
Yes. One thing I wanted to bring up was, you know, we're members of a community that is formed around our sense of sexuality and so on. And of course, as a whole throughout the population, as you get older, in some way, your sexuality is sort of taken away from you. Yeah. And so I think, is that something that is felt acutely in a community where sexuality is the sort of binding, you know, thread anyway? I mean, like, Dahi, you're nodding there. Do you feel that you're becoming more invisible? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but more invisible
No.
in the community
And I'm
as you get older?
very sensitive about that word invisible. I'm a big fan of James Hagan. I really, really am. What he is doing at LGBT Ireland with the Champions program, and many of them are in the comments or here. Vanessa Bradbury, I see, is online, and Amy, and there's a whole list of them. They're just brilliant. And anyway, about invisibility. Let's let go of invisibility, because there's nothing invisible about me or Alva or Will or any of us. We're here, we're queer, and we're loud. And about sexuality, I know that I'm in formerly Catholic Ireland, and I know that can scare the horses, older or younger and all. It ain't over till it's over, okay? I know how to, well, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I know my way around social media applications, and at the end, I'll give you my fans only account, okay? Okay.
Alva?
There may be differences there between women and men, actually.
Yes.
I think I think that's more difficult, in fact, for women. And of course, women are, shall I say, de-sexed much more at a much earlier stage than men are anyway. And that's right across the board of sexuality and gender expression and so on. But there's no doubt about it. So I think one of the things I was thinking earlier in the conversation is that, the notion, because social life is kind of, we associate LGBT social life with very young people, you do have to make up your own social life. And I think that is a bit of a problem. I don't want to get too far into it, because I think it's quite mixed and very varied. But there is absolutely no doubt that as you get older as a woman, and whether you're lesbian or whether you're straight or whether you're actually a trans woman or, whatever, you are perceived as not being sexual. And that is actually quite difficult, because, of course, we are. And Dahi's quite right. We stay sexual until whenever we want to stop, or we just don't feel it, the libido goes, or whatever it is. But you're also not expected to be sexy. And I think that's a problem. And I have seen shock horror on faces when older women, I won't mention myself or any other names, when we're seen to flirt. Well, what's wrong with flirting with somebody? That's one of the great pleasures of life, isn't it? And I don't know how to deal. I don't know how to deal with that problem. I really do not know, except to say, look, I am a sexual being. But then I would also have to say, and I'll finish on this point, my straight friends say to me, oh, you lesbians get to stay sexy and sexual longer than we do. So what's that about?
Man. Will, yes.
I know how to deal with that problem, Eva. I know well how to deal with that. If I'm in a conversation with a group of queer men, and there's young and old and everything, I do not hold back on the fact that I'm still a sexual being. I'm sorry, Dahi knows me well. I will just absolutely let you know that I'm still very interested, still very active. I think it's up to ourselves, because there is this kind of assumption. I've come across, it shocked me, because I don't see myself, I don't know, in my head, I'm not 63. I don't know what it is to be 63 or should be or anything like. So sometimes it shocks me when somebody treats me as, particularly if somebody calls me sir. Somebody goes, sir, in that kind of way that I look around to wonder, who in the fuck are they talking to? I'm not, and also I said I'm working class, so I'm not used to being called sir, usually a lot of other things. And I just think I need to really let them know. in a nice way, maybe like that. Yeah, I am. And I've been pulled up sometimes in conversations where I'm actually talking about sexual health. I'll always remember this particular one. I won't say the organization or where. I was outside a window having a conversation about somebody about a conference I had come back from. And we were chatting, and somebody came out and said, the youth group is inside there, which is 17 to 25. Could you not be, could you keep it down? And I was like, hold on a minute. They're 17 to 25. I said, this is what's fucking wrong with this country. Do you think they're not having sex? They're not masturbating? They're not whatever? I was like, it so annoys me, this whole attitude of, yeah, you're old, sit in the corner. I knit, so I can't say that. I took up knitting when I had cancer. But it's like, sit and knit in the corner. No. It annoys me. But really.
That is so healthy. That is so healthy, your attitude. But I think it is. I'm going out on a bit of a limb here because there will be people who will say, well, how do you know that? But I think it is a bit more difficult for women, actually. And as I say, particularly as we grow older, and you have to be quite determined about it. In fact, I was thinking to myself, it's a pity Pride isn't going to be on the streets this year. I just have a yen to get out there in the miniskirt again and so the little bikini top. And I'm thinking, why ever not? Why not? Because you got to do.
You look great in a miniskirt, Alva.
Thank you, Rory. But we've got to keep going, and women are expected. Well, actually, no, lesbians, we can wear whatever we like, but there's all kinds of unwritten rules and regulations. I haven't really thought about the coding of that. And those of us who are also, I have to say I am a grandmother, but I refuse to dress or behave in some kind of grandmotherly way. But I am a very real grandmother, very real. And I love my two grandchildren, but I'm not going to do the grandmother thing, whatever that is. I don't think any grandmother actually does it. I think it's a myth.
Well, Alva, I for one would love to see you in a blue rinse. I want to see Alva in a blue rinse.
Well,
I'm sort of conscious
hair has died.
Yes. I'm going to get conscious of the time. So maybe to sort of finish up, so we're not all doom and gloom. Like, what have you come to appreciate about getting older as you've gotten older? I mean, what are the benefits? I mean, what are the things you wouldn't trade? What do you love about being older? Dahi, yes.
Before the plague arrived, I always got a seat on the bus or the train. I'll take that. That's a good thing. Discounts, charity shops. It's all good. So no, I look for free things. I'm a pensioner, and I found this, and I want to thank the HSE because this came in the mail. My home test kit for my bowel screen. It was free. So thank you. It's all good.
Well, I'm sure they'll be delighted that you're delighted. Alva, what have you enjoyed about getting older?
I think a greater sense of freedom. I mean, I have to say I don't feel less driven because there's so many things that need doing. But I do have that sense of freedom, and I think I was always very insecure, even when I was in my 30s and 40s. I mean, it was hard in Ireland as a feminist, or an alleged feminist, as I was called once, as a feminist. I said, no, it's not an allegation. It's absolutely true. I am a cross-carrying feminist. As a feminist, as a lesbian, as someone who had broken a lot of the conventional rules, I'd been married for 6 months, got rid of that, and then had a child by well outside marriage, and then came out as lesbian in UCD, which was and probably still is a very proper, very conventional, very traditional institution. Kind of threw my hat at aspects of my job chances, my career chances there. Had a daughter, tried to bring her up. all of those kinds of things. I mean, it was pro-choice, of course, which was probably the greatest offence to the establishment of all, very interestingly. Mm. And I think as I've got older, I've understood that all of that was, you know, a very rich experience and a very enriching kind of life, and that I can kind of enjoy that a bit more now and enjoy the sense of freedom. And I care what people think, but I don't care very much what they think of me. And I think that's the big change. And there is a lot of fun about being able to tease people. And I quite like the occasional little bit of respect, I must say, Will, you know, when they treat me like a kind of, they call me a veteran campaigner. And I think, yes, right, quite proper order, thank you very much. So I'm as well, and I don't mind doing it occasionally. Pull rank. We can pull rank. We're older, we're wiser, we know more. So there's a lot of fun in that. And also just being with people my own age is also great fun, always great fun. And I mean, I just like living, basically, and that stays with you. I think if your health keeps up, and we all have to hope for that.
Yeah. And Will, what have you liked about getting older?
I think for me, it's a sense of, finally, a sense of self. In the last few years, it's taken years, simply because of my history. Being born in a time, as Dahi said, when it was illegal, when it was a criminal offence, when it was all that shit. And I took to drink and drugs. They really saved me. I've been through loads of counselling and still am. And I believe they saved me. I believe they got me through the years. Yes, they stopped working, but they got me through all my teenage years, and the bad times. So then having to deal with that, putting down the substance that I used to deal with my life, putting that down and then trying to explore who I was, what my life meant, having to come out gay, having to come out with HIV, having to do all this and learning more and more and more about me. Today at 63, it's not that I don't care what they think about me. I don't give a fuck what they think about me. I care about the world and the world around me, but I don't give a tuppenny shite about what anybody thinks about me, because I've earned my place in this world the tough way. And if somebody says to me, I have been called a veteran too, that shocked me. Recently, somebody said, writing a little blurb about me, veteran activist. And I'm like, oh my God. But it's that sense of being able, I think, when you get older, you realize that even if you haven't suffered, you've lived, you've experienced stuff, you've learned, you've done it. Now, if there's any other time, now is the time to be able to speak. And speak your part, and that we're here once, as far as I'm concerned. As I said, I'm non-religious. This is not a rehearsal. This is my life. And you can just go and shove it if you don't accept me, because I don't want to be in your company or anybody's who does. I want to be in company of my own kind and have fun. I just so love, we have a little group that disbanded about 4 years ago, because now our group it's the support group for HIV, but we had one that was just came in. But we still get together for dinner about every 6 months. And I swear to God, we just sell a bunch of fags together. We could end up in a restaurant in the country because a couple of our members around the country arrive in 12 flaming queens screaming and roaring. And it's I never thought that I would do that when I was growing up. It's that sense of freedom to do that. It's just, it's a different world. It's a brilliant one. And that's why I'm glad you said end positive. I really focus on, the positive, I'm going forward.
I think we should be very positive too, and very proud of the fact that we and so many others like us of our generation really led the way, and that it has eased the path. All is not yet done, but it is absolutely lovely and heartwarming and wonderful to see younger ones, standing up and saying, actually, I'm gender fluid, or I'm non-binary. I just love that. I just think it's about reinventing the world and sexuality. Bring it on. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I get an absolutely, such a thrilled, warm, delighted feeling when I see really young queer couples in the street holding hands. I was walking down Henry Street the other day, and there was two guys, I'd say 18 or 19 years old, maybe, walking along very showing the world that they were a couple and with their little chests out. And I wanted to run over and hug them.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Well, I guess to finish up, like, do you feel like in your soul that Ireland is more inclusive now than it was? Because I do, but I will say I do miss some of the excitement of being, the underground, bad boy. Do you feel it in your soul that Ireland has changed dramatically?
I think it has been pushed and shoved to change. And I think it has changed really significantly and is still in the process of changing for LGBTIQs. As I said, there is still a long way to go. But very sadly, I think in our many splendored community, we are of all different colours and ethnicities and, ages, abilities, and so on. And I mean, we are still a country which talks about equality, but really does not actually work nearly hard enough to ensure that people in direct provision, for example, or all trans people, or people with disabilities, or women who are experiencing, violence and abuse. We are changing. We have changed. It is good, but it is still a process ongoing. And this is there's no cause for complacency in this country. Yeah. Absolutely none. But we should be proud of the changes that we have been part of bringing about and keep on going. People sometimes say, do you not think of retiring? And I say, well, how could you retire as an activist when you don't have to? But why would you? How could you when you see that there is so much in the world that you can contribute and be part of changing for the better of other people? So that's what I think.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Although I have to say, I couldn't help but remember the slogan, lots done, lots more to do.
Don't say it.
I would utterly agree, though. I would have to agree on that, because for those of us of a certain age who remember the really dark days as they were, and as Rory said, like, I do miss part of it. I miss the cruising, I miss the underground. The community that we had there was a separate community. It was brilliant. But if you had told me as a young gay man at 14 or 15 who tried suicide 3 times in his teenage years, if you had told me there's going to be a gay T-shirt, we were going to have marriage, you could walk down the street and see people of your sexuality holding hands, that alone for me, makes me feel it was worth the fight. And even though I can get despondent sometimes now and sad about how much is still left to be done, no, I look at what has been done and I say, right, if we did that, how much more that we can do. And that's why I think we keep going as activists. Because there are times I just want to throw it all in. You look and think, oh God, another meeting, more bureaucracies, form filling, do whatever. We've all been through it. And you just go, no, I can't. And then you go, no. Somehow you pull yourself together and go off again. It's but it's worth it. Look at what we've achieved, because that to me is the benchmark for what we can do, the rest that we can do.
Yes, I agree. And what was achieved by a movement that started off with a tiny handful of people fighting against all the odds. I mean, what they did achieve is incredible. As I always say, there was a tiny period in my life where I desperately didn't want to be queer, but I am so thrilled I turned out to be queer. It's made me very happy.
I agree.
All right, I think our time is up. I'll just from a couple of comments before we go. From Maureen McGovern, maybe one of the lessons from the disability community is we fought for personal assistance so we could live an independent life as we see fit. This would be very important for older LGBT who can stay at home and is their choice. Yes, indeed. And we have with Tilda. Yes. Thank you. Well, thank you to everybody who's commenting and saying that they enjoy the discussion. We're glad you did. Question from Emer Rymerthal. Do you think there should be LGBTQ nursing homes? Well, we cover that. All right. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Di. Thank you, Alva. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope it's been, I don't know, illuminating for the people who have been watching, and lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Great.
And
Thanks for
thanks, of
having
course,
us.
to the festival.
Great.
Thank you to the festival, of course.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.